can't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Eevee and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Ernie the Blur without fear. Welcome back to the channel. All right, so today's video, we're going to be talking about X-Men number 10, but more specifically, some of the things that happened this issue that I had no clue were ever on the table, ever possible. Actually, kind of makes me feel as though some of the grandstanding, as it were, some people would probably call it, that I've done, putting on the cape for some of these characters in the past to be brought back, I feel like is finally paid off. What I'm talking about here is the whole situation with Cyclops this issue. Can we put a moratorium on the Cyclops slander that I often see people espousing in the comments elsewhere on social media? Can we put a more, actually, I don't even want to say moratorium, because it makes it seem as though it's something that is temporary. It's something I think should be just put to bed entirely. I think that Cyclops slander just tells me you don't like X-Men. That's what that tells me, because Cyclops has been putting the cape on for mutant kind for so long, to a point where we saw over the course of Jed MacKay's X-Men up to this point that it was pretty obvious that this is a freedom force. This isn't Gail Simone's Uncanny X-Men. Gail Simone's Uncanny X-Men is found family, fighting together, sticking together, to survive. This is not what that is. This is basically the Brotherhood. We just call them the X-Men now. That's what this is. Cyclops even makes a joke about it just a few issues prior, saying, would you rather be dealing with my X-Men or my Brotherhood? And to be fair, while it seemed like it was something he said simply in jest, it's actually seeming to be more true by the moment. I mean, yes, there is a found family element to the story, very similar to Gail Simone's Uncanny X-Men, but it is not the main focus the way it is over on those books. This is about standing 10 toes down on business for mutant kind, and I am here for it. I'm totally here for it. I think the Cyclops, and I don't even think this is something new to him as a character. He's been doing this for a long time, and I feel like personally with this, some of the things that he says in this, they're very radical ideas, very revolutionary ideas and ideologies that I think people probably need to hear right now. And yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and say it. Yeah, I love the political commentary here, the political messaging here, the call out to the Hague Act, the call out to taking political prisoners, but without due cause, and serving private entities over the will of the citizens, in this case the American people specifically, and what revolution can potentially look like. The moment that he incited the Hague Invasion Act, that was basically Cyclops saying, I'm the fucking president of mutant kind right now.
I run the military if you want that beef.
Like, I could literally see it right now. He could literally be looking at Juggernaut in this moment and say,
lay the murder game down, B. Body that nigga, and then bring the body back. Don't come back with no body.
I can sit here all day and pontificate about all the things I love about it, but I'll spare you that just to keep us on task here. But I love seeing Cyclops like this. I always tell people my favorite version of Cyclops is Right-Clops. For those that don't know, that is the Cyclops who was right. That version of Cyclops is the Cyclops I have always been trying to tell people didn't just show up all of a sudden during the Utopia era. No, this was a Cyclops that had been around for a long time. A Cyclops, I would even dare say, existed all the way back during the 1985-ish era of X-Men God Loves, Man Kills. One of, I would dare say, one of the most important and probably most well-known X-Men story arcs, where we actually got to see the X-Men treated as true marginalized people. And in this issue, Cyclops is channeling all of that, and I think that's what I like so much about Jed MacKay's X-Men era, but also more specifically his take on Cyclops. This is a Cyclops that is not afraid to fight back, a guy who is more than willing to grab a hold of Agent Lundquist's gun and pull it straight to his forehead and say, pull the trigger, I dare you, because if you kill me, there are going to be so many problems for humankind. I appreciate the fact that he doesn't even talk about the ace of spades that he is literally holding in his hand. He just goes to everything else first. He's telling him how it's going to destabilize the country because so many people in America are mutants. His death will galvanize characters like Rogue. Rogue was already kind of on that radical business, but like this would actually, you know, despite the fact that her and Cyclops are beefing right now, let's be real. Please believe Rogue would be one of the first ones to ride out if she found out that Cyclops was killed by the ONE. Let's take that off the table. We know that other X-Men factions would also rise up. Even though technically X-Force is kind of in some shambles right now, they're dealing with some personal stuff, I'm pretty sure they would probably drop whatever they're doing and come see what the hell was going on. And we also know that while the exceptional X-Men are more of a youth group, I definitely think that both Emma Frost, especially Emma Frost, and Kitty Pryde would come find out what's going down too. And I also think that, you know, even though technically NYX is not really a teen book in the traditional sense, NYX has so many different characters of, you know, different varieties who all have a connection to Cyclops in some way. I think it's safe to say most, if not all, of the NYX squad would roll up to, you know, run Lundquist's fate if he would have pulled the trigger in that moment, or anyone else who pulls the trigger in any moment in regards to Cyclops. And yeah, and that's just some of the people. That's just some of the people who would step up. You know, to like even Wolverine would come stand on business if Lundquist would have pulled the trigger in this moment. If anyone pulled the trigger in this moment, think about deaths in comics, like, you know, death being the great unifier. Like, you think back to those moments when characters have died, have been killed off, and how it galvanizes one side or another or all sides to do something specific. I would be willing to gamble that the death of Cyclops would have more of an effect on the mutant community than even Charles Xavier's would, especially at this moment in time. And it's not to say that, you know, I think he's gonna die anytime soon, but I definitely think Cyclops' death is something that could potentially happen very soon. Because I mean, I'll be honest with you, there's no reason that Jed MacKay wouldn't be bringing up this type of information and also pointing to the reasons why certain characters are in place. Case in point, Quentin Quire, aka Kid Omega, he literally says towards the end of this issue, that's the whole reason that Quentin's on the team. He's on the team because should he be killed and shit hits the fan like he thinks, I mentioned that ace of spades earlier being the Phoenix. Yes, if the Phoenix finds out that Cyclops has been killed, you best believe the Phoenix is coming to Earth. Like, I know Jean is out here shooting the fair one with Thanos and Pericus and all that other stuff, all that funny business out there in the cosmos, out there on the edge of, you know, the universe. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. But I'll be honest with you, I think that Jean, recognizing the death of Cyclops, she would immediately be like, no, hold on, pause, I'm gonna be right back. And then she would literally show up to run fades on everybody. It would literally be a barbershop special. Yeah, it'd just be a barbershop special on planet Earth. Literally 5-for-1 fades, everybody can get it. It would not matter. There would be very few people who would be able to stop her. And honestly, you want to talk about people that would probably lose their shit, that's just Phoenix. I actually think Storm would lose her shit. You know, granted, I think she would be a lot more measured about it than, you know, Jean would probably be. But yeah, I would not want to have two of the most powerful women right now in Marvel Comics angry over the death of Cyclops. I would not want it. I would not want that kind of smoke. And Cyc is right. If he were to die, it would be bad news bears for everybody. But the reason why, once again, as I said earlier, the reason why Quentin Quire is on that team is because he does have a connection to the Phoenix Force in a lot of the same ways as Cyclops does. Really, I think it's funny that it is Quentin Quire who is selected, not because, you know, he's not important. I mean, it does make sense. He is an Omega level telepath who has had a connection to the Phoenix. You could make the argument that, you know, I'm almost shocked he didn't pick Emma Frost. But at the same time, I think he also knows, well, for one, Emma Frost is not an Omega level telepath the way Quinn Quire is, but she would also probably lose her absolute shit. And while I don't doubt Emma Frost's ability, she does not have the cojones to be able to stand up to a Jean Grey empowered by the Phoenix. It just, I don't see that happening. If anything, honestly, I don't even think Emma would try to stop her. I actually think Emma would just join in on the fun. Like if Emma saw Jean just like beating the brakes off of humanity for the death of Cyclops, Emma would literally like, hey sis, can I get a little some of that? Can you break me off a little bit of that Phoenix Force like we did that one time? We do that again because I needs to get my kicks off. That's what I think would happen. I actually think that is the more likely thing that would take place. That's just me. That's just me. But yeah, Quinn Quire being there, having been a former host of the Phoenix Force, which is something I almost kind of slick forgot about. This is something I would be willing to forgive people if they don't remember, because it didn't actually happen in an X-Men book per se. It happened in Jason Aaron's Mighty Thor run. But that was about roughly the time where Quinn Quire had become one with the Phoenix Force. So for Cyclops to put respect on Quinn Quire in that regard, to be like, hey, you are the last line of defense. You are the guy who I need to take down the Phoenix. Something that could quite literally solo every superhero team in the Marvel Comics universe. I need you. That is a huge amount of respect on Quinn Quire in that regard, especially like in consideration to the fact that, Kid Omega has evolved a lot as a character. He has gone from being a character I could not stand to a character I'm actually quite okay with these days. But yeah, I love it. What Jed MacKay is doing here is fantastic. I don't fuck with the O&E like that, but man, Cyclops, it almost felt uncomfortable watching him bar up Agent Lundquist for like 12, 14, almost 16 pages. It was embarrassing. I was like, dude, I had secondhand embarrassment for Agent Lundquist because the whole time he kept thinking like, oh no, I'm that dude. I'm that G. No, you ain't. Like the whole time Agent Lundquist was trying to come in like he was a 10, having that 10 energy. But it's like, no, Cyclops like, nah, homie, from an 11 to a 2, let me sit you down and put you on game about where you really stand on this. And yeah, it was awesome to see. The other thing I thought was actually pretty cool too was that, in the midst of everything that Cyclops was doing, the fact that the O&E was attacking the factory as a result of all the stuff that was going on during the raid on Grey Malkin, and how Cyclops had a plan in place. Even for that, I mentioned the whole point where they brought up the Hague Act. This was something that was actually brought up directly because of what was going on with Beast and why the X-Men ran in on Grey Malkin the way that they did and took back Beast after he was imprisoned by Dr. Karina Ellis. But while Cyclops was talking to Agent Lundquist about this, one of the things that was brought up was the Hellions Protocol. The Hellions Protocol is apparently Cyclops' own version of what I won't call like a Suicide Squad or a Thunderbolt Squad, but it's definitely kind of indicative of the Hellions team that was unleashed during the Krakoan era. Some of you may or may not remember, during the Krakoan era, the Quiet Council had resurrected the Hellions team. Well, technically, they did actually resurrect the OG Hellions and brought them back, but they created a new Hellions team and treated it as a kind of a work release style program. It was a way for mutants who have a, let's just say, problematic powers or problematic ways of using their powers. They would take these characters and put them on the Hellions and utilize them for very specific missions where it was perfectly okay for them to just run roughshod. They still couldn't kill anybody, but they were still allowed to use their powers almost to their maximum and kind of get that aggression and energy out of themselves and allow them to do it in a very constructive way. And it kind of seems like that's exactly what Cyclops is doing with this version of the Hellions. And I could not be happier that he brought back two characters that I honestly thought I would never see again. And those are the characters of Bedlam and his brother, King Bedlam. King Bedlam, especially considering the fact that I thought he was actually dead at one point, or at the very least had faded off into obscurity. He's only ever been in like, I think 5 or 6 comics to this very date. Like literally, I think this issue, I think it might be the 5th or 6th comic he has ever been in. And that's incredibly weird for a character that has been around since like 1998. But yeah, I actually talk about him in another video you'll probably see making the rounds here very shortly. You should totally go check it out. I actually use this opportunity to plug it. There is a video I have that I think by the time this video comes out, I should have it out right now. It's gonna be my video breaking down X-Men editor Tom Brevoort's thoughts on the notion that there are no viable black X-Men characters. And I spend about roughly 45 to 46 minutes completely debunking that whole entire thought process. So yeah, go check that out. But in that video, I actually talk about not King Bedlam, but just regular Bedlam specifically. Yeah, that's one of those situations where, yeah, I think one of the last times we saw, regular Bedlam was during the Krakoan era. He was not doing anything. He was just hanging out in the Green Lagoon with all the other mutant characters. I think it was like X-Force number 9, I think. Yeah, X-Force number 9. And that was only because so many X characters were involved in that shot. But that's neither here nor there. It's good to see them back. It's also nice to see them having something to do, being a team. I don't know if Tom has any plans to make an actual Hellions series again, but if he does not, I think he should. I think this is a book that definitely needs to be made. And I also appreciate, because I know, yeah, they're not the only characters. We see the return of Boom Boom, and we also see Phantom X make his return in the From the Ashes era. We also see the return of Locust, a character who I feel like has been lost to the dustbin of history, which I think is quite shameful, honestly. But it was good to see Jed MacKay bring these characters back, especially Locust, considering that, we were just talking about, Tom Brevoort thinking there's no good, viable black X-Men characters, at least in terms of male characters, but you get to female characters, I feel like he probably has about roughly the same ideology. But yeah, that was one of the things about Locust that was always so strange to me too, is because it really depended on who was the artist at the time, during any of the appearances Locust has made, because sometimes she looked like she was a white woman, other times she looked black. But I think it's largely believed that she is a black woman, or at the very least biracial. But once again, I think it ultimately comes down to whoever is drawing these books at the time. But I know in this particular issue, she is depicted as what I feel is to be ethnically ambiguous. Like, she ain't white. If anything, I think what they probably are doing here is they're just splitting the difference and just considering her a biracial woman and leaving it at that. But I don't know, maybe we'll talk more about her as a character somewhere down the stretch, because I definitely want to shine a light on this, because I feel like a lot of people are going to just see her and just accept that there was no weirdness to her history. But point of the matter is, the Hellions are back, and Cyclops used them to attack very specific locations that could cause huge property damage for the O&E, largely striking what appears to be Sentinel facilities and causing millions, if not billions of dollars worth of property destruction, and basically creating a situation where they're not killing anyone, but they're destroying so much stuff that the O&E's government budget is likely going to go 100% into the red. And that's not going to be good for them, because basically it's going to ultimately lead to their defunding. And Lundquist doesn't want that, because he knows he'll be out of a job. And he also recognizes that the government probably is not going to be too keen on the fact that he's losing Sentinel factories, especially at a time where they probably want to have more Sentinels now more than ever because of the displacement of mutants from Krakoa. So yeah, it's going to be bad news for Agent Lundquist if any of this happens. And it also seems like, while we're never told exactly what it is that King Bedlam wants, there's a very specific person, it seems, that Cyclops is aware of that King Bedlam wants to be delivered to him, and the X-Men are going to have to be the ones to deliver that head. It's not something that I think we're going to actually see an answer to anytime terribly soon, because even as Cyclops says, don't worry about that for now. This is something that is story set up for later. But yeah, I think whoever it is, whatever it is, it's somebody that Cyclops doesn't seem terribly worried about having to hand over to King Bedlam. And considering how few appearances that he's had, part of me wonders if it's going to have anything to do with the Church of Humanity, because that was who was responsible for the killing of Bedlam, as well as a ton of other mutants around that time frame. you'd have to go back to like the Holy War story arc of Uncanny X-Men. That was back when I believe it was Chuck Austin that was writing that storyline, which it was kind of a wild one. It was only a 2-parter, but I think there were the Supreme Pontiff, I believe, who was leading the charge on that one, which technically was a character that could have been any one of 2 different people. But around that time, it was a woman who was the Supreme Pontiff, and it kind of implied that she died during the events of that story arc. So I don't know, maybe it has nothing to do with the Church of Humanity. Who knows? Or maybe she's alive out there somewhere. Who knows? It's comics, no one's dead forever. I don't know how they're gonna square that circle. We're talking about Jed MacKay here. It is gonna be like, as a matter of fact, yeah, now that I've said that, yeah, it's gonna be a character no one is thinking about. It's gonna be a character that you're not thinking about, I'm not thinking about, no one is thinking about. It's gonna be the deepest of deep cut characters, because that's just how Jed MacKay works. So it's gonna be one of those type of deals where we're all gonna find out who the character is, and we're all gonna be like, who? Other than that, the only other major thing that comes up is Magneto and his whole deal with RLDS. That we already knew about. If you just kind of tuned in on Magneto and you're wondering what the hell RLDS is, it is a specific disease that is developed through mutants who died and were resurrected via Krakoan means. It causes a mutant to lose control of their mutant powers. They don't lose the power, they lose control of it, which is why Magneto has been confined to that chair. He looks a lot more elderly and wizened than what he did when he initially came back from his resurrection of Magneto story arc, where he had been dead for about a calendar year and then was resurrected during the Fall of X. When he came back then, he looked really young. So the fact that when we get to this and we're like, oh wow, he's looking like way older now, like what happened? That is what was going on here. No other mutants right now seem to be affected by it, but considering how many mutants died during the Krakoan era and were brought back, it's safe to say I don't think Magneto is going to be the last person to get it. Though part of me wonders if his situation is very different, because technically his last resurrection, and I feel like this is where there's kind of a plot hole going on here, his last resurrection wasn't via Krakoan mean. Magneto's last resurrection was via like supernatural, mystical means. So it makes me wonder, especially considering that it was even stated then that his body was supposed to have gotten like a clean, like he himself was supposed to be have given a clean slate in his resurrection. I wonder if this is just one of those things, like the more I think about it, I wonder if this is just, hey, we were writing this story before the Fall of X was even happening, so we didn't really know what was going to happen with that, and now that the Fall of X is come and gone, it's like, okay, we're gonna have to figure out how this fits. Because I do have it on pretty good authority that a lot of the stories you're reading, like at least a lot of the earlier From the Ashes stuff for X-Men, was all stuff that was written before the Fall of X had even completed. Like I think the Hellfire Gala was still relatively fresh in a lot of people's minds. Like I do remember talking with Murewa Ayodele about his Storm series, and he was pretty open about the fact that when he started writing Storm, how the Fall of X was going to end was not necessarily set in stone yet at that point. So considering, if you look at like the timing, I'm willing to gamble Jed MacKay, his stuff started maybe even before that. So yeah, we'll just have to wait and see. I'm curious to know how it's gonna go down, but yeah, there's not really much new information, just a friendly reminder that this is a thing that's going on and it will have to be addressed at some point.